The information provided by Trading Forex Price Action to you does not constitute personal financial advice. The information provided is of a general nature only and does not take into account your individual objectives, financial situation, or needs. It should not be used, relied upon, or treated as a substitute for specific professional advice.
Hey guys, this is a weekly forecast for November 7th through the 11th of 2022. Okay, let's start off with the dollar Swiss pair.
Okay, this is a daily chart. Let's start off with an overview of the current setup I'm looking at. So the last daily long trade, that form was right here. And the last daily short trade, that form was right here. And going strictly from the strength differential between these daily trades, this short trade seems stronger than this long trade. So the daily bias seems to be short. Or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. However, as you guys know, the lower time frame confirmations have the ultimate say in terms of these biases. So let's go ahead and see what's happening there. Let's go over to the 1 hour chart. Okay, so on this 1 hour chart, the daily biases risk parameters is between this pivot high right here and that daily pivot way below that I just showed you. Now, if you guys recall, initially at this level right here, there was 15-minute confirmation of strong short strength, confirming that daily bias to be short. And then last week, as price ranged about in these areas, I was mentioning during the month of October and November, price tends to get rangy, and thus oftentimes the lower confirmations tend to form in both directions. And so I'll be waiting for a higher time frame lower confirmation. Okay, and this week we did get confirmation of strong long strength right at this price level right here. And that's from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here. There was a breakout, an immediate break back in, confirming normal short strength. However, price came right back up to that pivot high to override the normal short strength and create strong long strength and confirm that weekly bias to be long. However, I did not take this long entry because the stop loss level for a long trade will be at that pivot low on the daily risk parameters I showed you earlier. Okay, and then right after that, price jetted right up to that target, just shy by 1 pip, did not hit that main target level right here. And then in the last couple of days, price came right back down to now confirm strong short strength. Okay, and that's from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here. We got a break out, an immediate break back in to confirm normal long strength, but price came down to that pivot low last night to create strong short strength. Okay, so at this point, that daily bias is confirmed to be short again. And so in the coming days, if I could get a pullback right up to these 1.0047 levels right here, I'll be willing to take a short entry with a stop loss at this pivot high right here and its main target at that daily bias's risk parameter way below. Okay, so that'll be about 100 pip stop loss. Okay, so again, in the months of October and November, markets tend to range. So even if I do enter this short entry, I'll be constantly watching for another bias change through a lower confirmation, forming again in the opposite direction, which will be long. And if that forms, I will abort this short trade immediately. Okay, but I'll keep you guys updated with this one. Okay, so let's go on to the Euro Yen. Okay, and if you're having trouble understanding what I'm talking about in terms of weekly biases and lower confirmations, please check out my forecast manual, which is an instruction manual that helps you better understand these forecasts. So if you don't understand a certain term or idea I'm talking about, you can look it up in the instruction manual. Okay, and the link for that is in the details section of this video. Okay, this is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. Okay, so about 6 months ago, right at this level right here, Those strong long strength confirmed from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here. For those a break out and immediate break back in, confirming normal short strength. However, about 8 months later, price came right back up to that pivot high to override that normal short strength and create strong long strength. And so in the long term, I am long biased right back up to this pivot high right here. And moreover, on the weekly chart, the last long trade that formed was right here. And just this week, there was a new short trade that formed right here. And I'm currently waiting for the lower time frame confirmations to confirm this weekly bias. And so in the short term, I am neutral biased. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by what's been happening on this pair for the last couple of months. So the last weekly long trade formed in February of this year, right here. And then about a month later, there was a week short trade that formed. So the bias was long, or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And then another month later, there was another week short trade that formed when compared to this long trade. So the bias remained long, but now price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And the same scenario kept repeating over and over. So at this point right here was another weak short trade when compared to this last long trade. And moreover right here, the same thing happened. There was a weak short trade. And so the bias remained long, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. Okay, and just this week, we had a new weekly short trade that formed right here. So let me go ahead and show you how to measure the strength of this short trade against this long trade that formed way back. All right, so let's go over to the monthly chart. All right, so on this monthly chart, that weekly long trade formed in this area, and that weekly short trade formed just this week, right in this area right here. Now, in terms of long strength for that long trade, we have two small gaps that provide long strength, and moreover, this trend line right here that's providing long strength for that long trade. Okay, so let me just show you the levels for that. Okay, so this gap's upper level is at 129.39, and the lower level is at 128.45. Okay, and this lower gap's upper level is at 127.81, and the lower level is at 126.78. And then moreover, we had this trend line that's providing long strength, and that's from this pivot to this pivot right here. Okay, so again, we have these two small gaps and this trend line that's providing long strength for that weekly long trade. Now let's go over the short trade. So for this short trade, we have two small gaps, these two levels right here. So let's go. So let me show you the levels for that. So the upper level for this top gap is at 148.04, and the lower level is at 147.57, and this lower gap's upper level is at 146.37, and the lower level is at 146.07. Okay, moreover, we also have this legitimate trend line that's providing short strength for that weekly short trade. So let me go ahead and show you where this trend line comes from. Let's zoom out. Okay, so that trend line is from this pivot to this pivot right here. As you can see, there's 3 touches on it, so it's a legitimate trend line. Okay, so going strictly from these monthly elements, the weekly long trade that formed right here again seems stronger than this weekly short trade just formed this week. Now that's because, first of all, these gaps right here are wider than these gaps right here. And you want to remember, the wider the gap, the more strength it creates. Right, and moreover, this trend line up here has 1, 2, 3, 4 touches on it. While this trend line down here has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 touches on it. And a general rule of trend lines is that the more contact points it has, the more strength it creates. Okay, so both from a gap perspective and a trendline perspective, there's more long strength on this weekly long trade than short strength on this weekly short trade. However, like always, the lower time frame confirmations have the ultimate say in terms of these higher time frame biases. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what's happening down there. Let's go over to the 4-hour chart. All right, so on this 4-hour chart, try drawing this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. Now price could come down to this trend line, break it out, and immediately break back in. That will create normal long strength. But if price could come right back down to that pivot low to override that normal long strength, that will create strong short strength and thus confirm that weekly bias to be short. However, in the case of the Euro Yen, I will not be taking a short entry at this point because like I showed you on the overview, there's overarching strong long strength on this pair to begin with. Okay, so in order for me to get lower confirmation so I could take a long entry, this is what I'll be looking for. So after this strong short strength is created at this pivot low, if we get a nice V-shaped recovery on the even lower time frames, that will confirm extreme long strength. And that's going to confirm that bias to be long. And I'll be willing to take a long entry. Now, another thing you want to remember in terms of entries is that since there's overarching strong long strength on this pair to begin with, the stop loss level for a long entry is going to differ from traditional bias stop losses. So in this case, if this V-shaped recovery forms, the stop loss will be put at the pivot low of that V-shaped recovery, while the main target remains the same at this pivot high. Okay, so we'll just see what happens with this one, and I'll keep you guys updated.
Okay, so just a heads up, in terms of lower time frame confirmation, you want to remember there's 3 degrees to it. Now that's normal, strong, and extreme. And each degree overrides its weaker counterpart. So strong confirmation overrides normal confirmation, and extreme confirmation overrides strong confirmation. And moreover, when it comes to the strength of a trend line, a basic rule to remember is that the more contact points on a trend line, the more strength it creates. Okay, so that's it for the forecast. I hope you guys have a great week, guys. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.